You didn't need a spotlight. You didn't need permission. You didn't need to prove your worth. You just needed time, space, stillness, and the courage to trust that you were enough all along. So keep healing in private. Keep growing in silence. Keep winning quietly. Because the people who doubted you won't hear a word. They'll feel your absence, then see your rise. And by then, you won't need them to understand. You'll already be far beyond the version of yourself they thought they knew. You stop announcing your plans. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop seeking applause for doing the work. And that's when the real magic happens. Because growth without validation is unstoppable. You're not performing for approval anymore. You're doing it for yourself, for your future, for the life you know you're meant to live, even if no one else can see it yet. And when the winds come, and they will, you won't need to shout. Your presence will speak for itself. The energy you carry will feel different. The peace you walk in will be unshakable. The discipline you built in silence will radiate through every decision you make. People will notice, not because you told them to, but because change that deep can't be hidden forever. It reveals itself in your confidence, in your choices, in the way you move with purpose and peace. Healing is messy. It's not beautiful enough for a highlight reel. It's waking up with a heavy chest and still choosing to show up. It's crying behind closed doors and still smiling in public. It's sitting with truths that shake your soul and choosing not to run from them anymore. That kind of growth can't be explained in captions or proven with quotes. You don't owe anyone a detailed map of your healing journey. It's yours, and you're allowed to protect it like the sacred process it is. In that silence, something begins to shift. You start seeing things clearly. People you once chased begin to fade from your thoughts. Habits that drained you begin to lose their grip. Goals that once felt impossible now feel urgent. Not because of pressure, but because of purpose. And slowly, without needing to prove anything to anyone, you start to level up. Quietly, intentionally, relentlessly. Some people will never explain themselves because they don't want to face the truth of who they are. And some won't because they know they can't fix what they broke. Let that be enough. Let silence be your liberation, because in that silence, you finally hear yourself again. And that sound, that's the beginning of everything you've been waiting for. There's something sacred about becoming who you're meant to be without needing the world to witness every step. We live in a time where people feel pressured to broadcast everything: pain, progress, growth, success, as if it's not real unless it's validated by likes, comments, or recognition. But real power doesn't demand attention. Real transformation doesn't need an audience. And the deepest healing, the kind that changes you from the inside out, often happens in silence. Away from noise, away from performance, away from people who only watch but never understand. Closure doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be dramatic. Sometimes it's as quiet as no longer checking their profile, no longer revisiting old conversations, no longer trying to understand why they weren't able to love you the way you needed. Closure can be the silent unfollow, the unanswered message, the deleted photos, the slow, steady return to yourself. Not as a reaction, but as a release. You don't owe anyone an open door to come back through. You don't owe them another chance to hurt you under the disguise of clearing the air. Sometimes your healing begins the moment you accept that the door has already been closed. You just kept trying to knock on it, hoping for a different ending. But the silence, that's your answer. That's the full stop at the end of the sentence. That's all the permission you need to move forward without them, without the apology, without the perfect goodbye. When someone doesn't value you enough to offer honesty, that's all the clarity you need. It's not your job to decode their silence, rationalize their behavior, or carry their guilt while trying to heal your own wounds. Let silence speak for itself, and learn to listen to what it's saying. You don't have to reopen the door to someone who slammed it. You don't have to ask questions to someone who already showed you they don't care enough to answer them. Your peace is not dependent on their willingness to explain themselves. It's built on your decision to stop waiting for what may never come. Because real closure doesn't come from them, it comes from you. It's the moment you decide your healing matters more than their explanation. It's the moment you stop rehearsing the what ifs and start choosing the what's next. We grow up believing that healing requires answers, that to truly move on, we need explanations, apologies, or at least a final conversation to tie things up neatly. We think closure is a door someone else has to close for us, a moment of clarity that will help us understand why things ended the way they did. But life, people, and pain aren't always that kind. Some endings come without warning. Some people leave without looking back. Some chapters just stop mid-sentence. And if you wait for closure from someone who wasn't honest with you when they had you, you'll keep reliving the same questions that broke you in the first place. Not everything will make sense. Not every person who hurt you will admit they did. Not every connection you lost will circle back to explain itself. And that's where a deeper truth emerges. Silence can be the closure. Silence returns to a sense of anchor. Silence can be the closure. The lack of apology is the apology. The way they left is the explanation. You deserve relationships where your absence hits just as hard as your presence. Where people don't just celebrate your highs, but worry about your lows. Where your silence isn't overlooked, it's heard, it's felt, it's respected. Because being there for people isn't just about showing up when things are good. It's about being emotionally available even when words aren't spoken. It's about seeing someone's absence as a signal, not a slight. Not everyone will notice when you're gone. That's okay. Let them drift, let them fall away. The ones who matter will feel it. They'll come looking. They'll ask the hard questions. They'll give back the energy you once gave. And those are the people worth keeping because they don't just want you around, they value who you are. Whether you're speaking, silent, giving, or simply being. Too many people are addicted to your presence, but numb to your pain. They love what you do for them, but they never think about how you feel when you're always the one giving. They assume you'll always be there, that your consistency is guaranteed, that your loyalty has no limits. And so they stop appreciating it, they stop earning it, and that's where the disconnection begins. Not because you changed, but because they stopped noticing you were even showing up in the first place. The right people, though, they don't need to be told. They feel it in the silence. They feel it in the spaces where your energy used to light up their life, and they come looking for you. Not out of obligation, but because connection is mutual. Real ones don't need reminders to check on you. They don't forget who stood by them when it mattered. They don't disappear when your life grows quiet. They stay, or they come back, or they ask what happened, instead of assuming you're just being distant. You spend so much time trying to show up for others, checking in, being there, giving your energy, your time, your effort. You stay available, responsive, supportive, even when you're tired, even when you're struggling. You do it because it feels right, because loyalty matters to you, because you care. But what happens when you pull back? What happens when you go silent? When you stop pouring into people who never really poured into you? That's when you learn something powerful. The right people feel your absence, not just your presence. They notice when your energy is missing. They feel the shift when your name stops popping up on their phone. They sense the void when your support isn't there to hold them together. And they don't just notice it, they care. They reach out. They ask. They show up. Because they valued you, not just what you gave. Let them feel the space you once filled. Let them realize the gravity of what they mishandled. Because real consequences aren't always loud. Sometimes they echo in the emptiness left behind when you decide you're done accepting crumbs from people who once had access to the feast. Disrespect isn't a test of how much you can endure. It's a test of how deeply you love yourself. The more you respect your own energy, the quicker you'll walk away from anyone who does. You won't argue. You won't chase clarity from those who use confusion to control. You won't explain to someone why kindness and decency are the bare minimum. You'll simply exit. Silently. Completely. Because you now understand that being disrespected isn't a fight. It's a fork in the road. And you get to choose peace. But here's the truth. Your energy, your time, your love are not up for debate. You are not a proving ground for someone else's insecurities. You are not a mirror for their projections. And you are not responsible for teaching grown people how to respect what they never learned to value. When someone shows you that they don't honor your boundaries, don't recognize your contributions, or don't speak to you with the basic decency every human deserves, that's your cue, not to fight, not to explain, but to leave. Walking away doesn't mean you lost. It means you won something far more important, your self-respect. You don't need to slam doors or burn bridges. You just stop showing up where you're not seen. You take your silence, your distance, and your absence, and let that speak volumes. By the time they ask, how did you do it? Your life will answer for you. New circles that speak your language, projects bearing your name, opportunities that only open for the relentless. And the same mouths that once questioned your potential will tell the story of how they always knew you were destined. Let them rewrite history. You're busy writing the future. You don't chase revenge. You chase mastery. You don't clap back, you cash in on potential, on discipline, on the version of yourself who refused to be shaped by their small frame of reference. Every milestone you reach delivers a silent message louder than any comeback line. Their doubt was never about your limits. It was a reflection of their own. And nothing disrupts a doubter's comfort like watching the person they underestimated lap them without uttering a single word. Without whispers, you'll never make it. Drive answers by doubling your reps, finishing one more chapter, sending one more application. You keep receipts, but they're internal, private, stamped on your mind as confirmation of hours invested when nobody was watching. You don't broadcast the late night grind or the early morning sweat. You don't live stream the failures you flip into lessons. Let them assume you gave up. That miscalculation is part of your strategy. Because when results finally surface, they won't appear as gradual updates. They'll hit like a sunrise that blinds the room. Suddenly, the person they dismissed has certifications pinned to the wall, a body carved by discipline, a portfolio stacked with wins. Doubt does a double take. Drive just keeps walking by. There's a quiet thrill in knowing they can never trace your glow up, step by step. People who need to see progress to believe in it are forever late to the party. When someone underestimates you, a hidden reservoir of fuel starts to gather inside, waiting for the spark that will turn it into relentless momentum. Their doubt isn't just a judgment, it's free energy, an uninvited push that can propel you farther than compliments ever could. Every time they rolled their eyes at your dreams or dismissed your ideas as impossible, they unknowingly donated a brick to the foundation you're laying in silence. You collect each slight, each minimization, not to store as bitterness, but to convert into a blueprint for transformation that they'll never see coming. You wake up before dawn because mediocrity sleeps in. You read, you train, you study, you practice, all while the world scrolls past highlights on screens. They thought you vanished, but really you're in the lab of your own life, soldering together skills, discipline, and patience. And while they try to fill the space you left with temporary distractions and shallow replacements, nothing will match the depth you brought, the security, the presence, the peace. There will come a day when they realize you weren't just someone. They'll realize you were the one. But you won't be waiting for that day. You'll be living, healing, thriving. You'll be somewhere far from the version of yourself who once begged to be seen. Let them regret it. Let them sit with the consequences of their own choices. Let your silence remind them of what they lost. Because you didn't walk away because you stopped caring. You walked away because you finally started caring about yourself. And that shift, that's what changes everything. You were real, and in the end, that's what they'll miss the most. Not your words, not your presence, but your soul. The part of you they never truly deserved. The part they'll never find. Because one day they'll look around and feel the absence. The absence of your patience, the absence of your energy, the absence of your constant forgiveness. They'll miss the way you cared, even when they gave you nothing. They'll miss the way you believed in them, even when they gave you every reason to walk away. There's something deeply painful about being the one who stayed true while the other person took you for granted. You gave your loyalty when it wasn't returned. You showed up with consistency, with honesty, with a heart that didn't play games, and they didn't see it. Or worse, they saw it and still chose to treat you like you were replaceable. They thought your love was ordinary because they never imagined a world where you wouldn't always be there. But eventually, you get tired. Tired of explaining yourself. Tired of carrying one-sided relationships. Tired of proving your worth to someone who never really cared to understand it. And when that moment comes, you don't scream. You don't argue. You simply withdraw. You walk away, not out of weakness, but because you finally realized that no amount of love you give will ever be enough for someone who doesn't recognize value when they have it. And that's when the regret begins, not for you, but for them, because you'll know exactly who you are and what you're worth, and you won't need anyone to confirm it. You're not doing this for them. You're not rising from the ashes so they can see you. You're rising because you were never meant to stay small, never meant to stay broken. You're becoming the version of yourself that doesn't seek attention, but commands respect, quietly, confidently, without ever having to say a word. Let your silence be the buildup. Let your work in the dark speak when the light finds you again. You're not just making a comeback. You're becoming someone entirely new. And that doesn't require an announcement. It just requires you. Fully, deeply, and unapologetically committed to your own rise. You don't need to post your routine, your success, or your new mindset, because what you're building now is for you, not for the world, not for the ones who walked away, not for the ones who underestimated you. Let them wonder where you went. Let them whisper about your silence. Let them question whether you're okay. Meanwhile, you keep showing up for yourself. You keep growing, learning, working in the background. You let your progress be your secret, your peace be your focus, your future be your revenge. Because people expect a performance. They expect noise. They expect you to try and win them back or prove you were right. But when you say nothing and just evolve, that's when they feel it the most. When you stop explaining, stop defending, stop sharing everything, they start to feel your absence. And the version of you that reemerges after the silence, that version won't be begging for recognition. That version doesn't need applause. There's a certain kind of strength that comes from being quiet while you rebuild, from deciding that you don't need to broadcast your progress, announce your return, or prove to anyone that you're better now. In a world obsessed with being seen, with constant updates and digital validation, choosing to keep your comeback private is a radical act of self-trust. It means you no longer need to perform your healing for the approval of others. You're not chasing their reactions anymore. You're focusing on results, on reality, on what's real, not what's seen. You don't need to tell people how much you've changed. The ones who doubted you will see it eventually. And by then, it won't even matter. Because your comeback isn't about revenge. It's not about proving a point. It's about rising on your own terms. Quietly, authentically. You don't need a dramatic declaration, a flashy post, or a grand reveal. You don't have to write long paragraphs about growth, because the most powerful kind of growth is the kind no one sees, the kind that happens behind closed doors, the kind that builds resilience, not for show, but for your soul. Healing is not a trend. It's not an aesthetic. It's not for likes or comments. It's a return to yourself, a reconnection with your worth, a remembering of who you were before the world told you who to be. And that process deserves protection. Not everyone needs access to it. Not everyone is entitled to your pain, your journey, your evolution. Some things are too sacred to be shared. Some moments are too transformative to be explained. Let people wonder. Let them question where you went and how you're doing. Let them create stories while you create peace. Because healing isn't about proving, it's about becoming whole again. And that, more often than not, requires silence, solitude, and the courage to heal privately. Because healing is not a performance. It's not something you owe an audience. It's a personal process. And it's messy, non-linear, and sacred. When you're healing, you're rebuilding. Not just your heart, but your entire perspective. You're unlearning the lies people made you believe about yourself. You're learning how to live without what you once begged to stay. You're stitching together the parts of yourself you gave away trying to be enough. For people who never really saw you. And those moments, the real, raw ones, don't need to be broadcasted. They don't need applause. They need silence. They need space. You don't have to prove that you're okay. Not to them, not to anyone. Sometimes healing means crying at night without posting about it. Sometimes it means going through the day numb, but still showing up. Sometimes it means forgiving yourself quietly over and over again. There's a misconception in today's world that healing has to be loud, that it has to be seen, shared, or validated by others to be real. Social media has created this pressure to post your growth, to document your comeback, to let everyone know that you're moving on, thriving, evolving. But the truth is, real healing doesn't always look like filtered photos, perfect quotes, or motivational caption. It's quiet, it's uncomfortable, and most of the time, it happens in silence, far away from the spotlight. You don't have to tell the world what you're going through to prove that you're healing. You don't need to explain your silence, your distance, or your withdrawal. You're allowed to disappear, to take a break, to remove yourself from everything and everyone that drains your peace. You're allowed to go off the radar, not out of spite, but for survival. We grow up believing that closure is something we have to give or receive in order to move on, that we need some kind of final conversation, an apology, or an explanation to make peace with what happened. But the truth is, most of the time, closure is just a disguised attempt to reopen wounds that are already trying to heal. It's not always about healing. Sometimes it's just about hearing what we want to hear. And that can be dangerous. You don't owe anyone a breakdown of your pain. You don't have to explain why you left, why you went silent, why you stopped responding, because the people who truly valued you would have never put you in a position to question your worth in the first place. People who lie to you, hurt you, betray you, they don't suddenly become honest or remorseful just because you ask them to explain. And even if they do, their version of closure is often a carefully crafted excuse that makes them feel better, not you. We grow up believing that closure is something we have to give or receive in order to move on, that we need some kind of final conversation, an apology, or an explanation to make peace with what happened. But the truth is, most of the time, closure is just a disguised attempt to reopen wounds that are already trying to heal. It's not always about healing. Sometimes it's just about hearing what we want to hear, and that can be dangerous. You don't owe anyone a breakdown of your pain. You don't have to explain why you left, why you went silent, why you stopped responding. Because the people who truly valued you would have never put you in a position to question your worth in the first place. People who lie to you, hurt you, betray you, they don't suddenly become honest or remorseful just because you ask them to explain. And even if they do, their version of closure is often a carefully crafted excuse that makes them feel better, not you. When you choose silence, you're not letting them win. You're letting yourself heal. You're not ignoring the situation, you're rising above it. You're choosing to no longer explain your worth to people who couldn't see it in the first place. You're showing them that you won't lower yourself to meet their level of immaturity or manipulation. And that silence, it lingers. It sticks in their mind far longer than any angry words would. We live in a world that constantly tells us to speak up, to defend ourselves, to react. When someone wrongs us, we're told to clap back, prove them wrong, show them what they've lost. But the truth is, silence, true, intentional silence, is one of the most powerful statements you can ever make. Because silence doesn't mean you've run out of things to say. It means you've realized that some things aren't worth your energy anymore. It means you've chosen self-control over chaos and peace over drama. Anyone can raise their voice, argue, scream, or plead. That's easy. What's hard, what takes real strength, is walking away with dignity and letting the silence speak for itself.